U.S. Modernist Radio is part of DesignNetwork.org, exclusive architecture and design podcasts reaching creative listeners worldwide.
I'm Harriet Pattison, author of Our Days Are Like Full Years, a memoir with letters from Louis Kahn.
Richard Saul Werman, architect, creator of TED Conference, and Lou Kahn was, and strangely still is my mentor, as I think of him every day. And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. In Sarasota, Florida, one of the East Coast's finest centers for modernism, names like Paul Rudolph, Gene Leedy, Victor Lundy, Tim Siebert, and Jack West dominated the design scene from the 1940s through the 80s. Then came a new generation of architects that took things to a whole new level. One of those, Guy Peterson, joins us today direct from Sarasota. Later on, one of our favorite musical guests is back, Heather Rigdon. And finally, we'll spend a few minutes with our buddy Frank Harmon. And now, before sunrise, before sunset, after midnight, here's your host, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Do those titles sound familiar? They are from 3 movies by Richard Linklater, the master of plots with long timelines. In the first one, Before Sunrise, released in 1995, Jesse meets Celine on a train from Budapest, and they strike up a romance roaming around beautiful Vienna. They share a kiss, they talk about love, they even imagine phone calls to each other's friends. And after a magical whirlwind time together, they part, promising to meet again in 6 months. You just can't help but fall for Jesse and Celine, played by Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Fast forward to the second movie, Before Sunset, filmed in 2004. Jesse and Celine never had that 6-month rendezvous, but 9 years later, Jesse is a famous author at a book signing in Paris when You Know Who walks in.
Aww.
And the relationship born of that first incredibly romantic train trip starts anew. This time, after a few arguments about who didn't show up and why 9 years earlier, they start their life together. Fast forward to 2013 in After Midnight. Jesse and Celine are a married couple with kids. The fruit is off the vine, and they have now to deal with the real work of relationships, communication, trust, commitment, and renewal. You're wondering, will there be another one? Let's see, 1995, 2004, 2013. That puts the next movie at 2022.
Right.
Richard Linklater is ambiguous at present, but a legion of fans, including me, hopes there will be a new movie.
And he did that movie Boyhood, too, didn't he?
He filmed Boyhood like every year for about a dozen years.
Right.
And the boy in the movie actually grows up over the course of the film.
Yeah, that was really cool.
It's astonishing. Cycles have a special place in our soul. They help us understand how, as human beings, things shift as we age, marry, work, move, have kids, and retire, not always in that order. These movies, lovingly referred to by fans as the Before series, were released 9 years apart. There's something comforting in the predictability of cycles, until, of course, they change. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Wendy Robineau and Don Beskin, and by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In her continuing made-up life, Modernist realtor Angela Roll bought the duplex next to stately Wayne Manor in Gotham City. No one wanted to live next to the reclusive billionaire and his creepy butler Alfred and the loud, mysterious late-night noises from some souped-up car roaring out of a cave. Living on one side of the duplex and advertising for a tenant in the other, one day Angela's doorbell rang. It was Dick the Penguin. He said,
Wah. Now look, Angela, the guy in the stately Wayne Manor and his creepy butler are my arch enemies, and I need a cheap place to build an evil exploding shark. When can I move in?
With that, Angela became the Penguin's landlord, and recognizing her design skills, he hired her to do the build. It took a year because an exploding shark takes a lot longer than you think. You have to build a pool for it, you have to transport it, and you have to get your victim in the water. That's a real pain. As Angela designed the fins, built the shark cages, and installed the explosives, she realized the penguin's evil plan had to be stopped. Of course, we all know what happened. The penguin shark finally deployed and, strangely, swam away from the Caped Crusader. With specialized design training, Angela Roll advises buyers and sellers of Modernist houses on everything from appropriate renovation to secretly giving Alfred a can of shark repellent. Angela Roll is your special agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550. By the way, the shark went on to later co-star with Henry Winkler on the TV show Happy Days, in an episode that coined the term jumping the shark. Just Google it to figure out what we mean.
Thank you, Tom. Except for a brief birthing period in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Sarasota architect Guy Peterson has been a lifelong Florida resident, growing up surrounded by great examples of the Sarasota School of Architecture. And going to high school in one, Guy earned bachelor's and master's degrees in architecture from the University of Florida. He is president of the Guy Peterson Office. Good choice. And he has designed more than 200 buildings in Southwest Florida over the last 40 years. Guy received the AIA Florida Gold Medal for outstanding contributions to architecture. He teaches at the University of Florida, and he's the author of Naked, the Architecture of Guy Peterson. Oh. We'll have to find out if there was a centerfold. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you.
So was there a centerfold in your book?
No, but when I came up with the name Naked, it wasn't meant to be provocative. It was meant to speak about the idea of the undressing of architecture, minimalism and simplicity. And I didn't realize at the time when I had a book signing, they would say, come to the Naked book signing. or Guy Peterson's going to sign his book Naked.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had a lot of fun with it, actually, but it wasn't meant to be provocative.
Now, come on, Guy. I mean, this is Florida. You say the word naked. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Now, before we get started talking about architecture, what's the story of an 80-pound fish you caught with Joe Norton, Mark Murphy, Mike Mach, and Conan Carr at the Eagle's Nest Young Sportsman's Club for boys?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know where you found that out, but that's...
We have a great research team here, Guy.
You sure do. Punta Gorda. Jim Kelly ran the Eagle's Nest. I went there for camp a couple summers. I had some of the best times of my life, but one of the trips we go out to Boca Grande pre-dawn, and we get in the fishing boat. We go out in the Boca Grande Channel, which is really one of the greatest tarpon fishing places in America, if not the world. And I was able to get a big one, and I wanted to have it taxidermy person, I guess the word is stuff it, but
right, and mount it.
Mount it, yes. Yeah. And my parents didn't want a tarpon on their wall in their house.
How old were you?
I was probably 14.
Oh man!
But they also taught me taxidermy at the camp, and I was able to mount the head. And when I went to high school, it was in my high school marine biology lab.
Oh, that's great.
So I got to preserve part of it.
I mean, this is an 80-pound fish. It must have been tremendous.
It was big. And the interesting thing is a lot of the tarpon you catch in Boca Grande, there's a lot of hammerheads, and you'll be fighting a tarpon, and all of a sudden you'll just come up with the upper part of it because the hammerheads will take them. But I was lucky to land it, and it was thrilling.
Now, you grew up in Sarasota, Florida. At what age did you become aware that architecture was a thing around town? When did it kind of hit you?
My father's a physician, and actually ultimately my two brothers became doctors, and I always thought I was going to be a doctor. But my parents were a member of a club, the Field Club in Sarasota, which is a yacht club. And a number of the members of the club were architects. And you mentioned some in your intro, Tim Siebert, Jack West, and my parents were good friends with them, and I grew up with their children. And then I also went to school with Victor Lundy's daughter at out-of-door school, and then I went to school with Frank Folsom Smith's two daughters. So I ended up knowing many of these architects through their children or through my parents. And my parents would tell me that, because I was a young man, a boy at the time, that these architects that have met here are part of an interesting movement in modern architecture that happens here in Sarasota. And plus, my parents were great friends of the chairman of the school board, and Phil Hiss was on that board, but the chairman was a good friend of my parents, and they were very instrumental in hiring Rudolph and the Sarasota school guys, the Gene Leedys, the Zimmermans, Tim Siebert, Rachel Lundy, ultimately Rudolph. And so I was surrounded by these people growing up, their children and these architects. So I think I was kind of aware of it, but not really understanding it. I always said that I wasn't part of the Sarasota school because I'm kind of a third generation, but it was part of me growing up. So by osmosis, I was kind of indoctrinated early in my life.
Did the kids that attended Riverview High School, which was designed by Paul Rudolph, were they into the building at all, or was it just like another high school for them?
You know, I think looking back on it, I'd say it's more like another high school. But I think that, I'll say from my perspective, I never heard anybody, we didn't have air conditioning back because the building was less than 10 years old when I went to high school there. And we'd open these big sliding glass walls, and they had Paul Rudolph had these sunscreen devices that would kind of cool the air before it moved through the building. And then he had these light monitors in the hallway that would draw the air back out through the rooms. So all these passive design features. And it's amazing today, in Florida, many times of the year, not during the summer, but, in May and June, it's hot. I never complained or never heard anybody complain about the buildings not being cool. So I think not cool in terms of temperature.
That must be the only unair conditioned building in Florida.
Well, at the time, I mean, air conditioning really didn't come into the schools until probably maybe in the early 70s.
Okay.
Because I went there, I started in 69 there, and there was no air conditioning.
That's amazing.
And, then the air conditioning they put in was not sympathetic to the design of the building, unfortunately.
Right.
Did it cause water to run down the walls or something like that?
Well, I think it caused a lot of problems, and not only from a design sensitivity, but I think in terms of, it wasn't properly insulated for air conditioning. It was designed to let air move through it, so it wasn't a sealed building in the sense, you got a lot of air infiltration. And I think through just lack of maintenance over the years, the building just started to, and then they put pitched roofs on it because it had flat roofs, and they just altered it to the point where when we were trying to preserve it, I was part of the group that was trying to save Riverview High School, and it became so bad, it was like, why would anybody want to save this building? But if you peeled the layers away, it was still there, and structurally it was in amazing shape. So we may have won a battle, but we lost the war, I think. But we did raise sensitivity around the world about saving some of these modernist structures.
What happened to the high school?
It's torn down. Riverview's torn down.
Oh.
And they put a new school there. We actually had an international design competition through the Sarasota Architecture Foundation, and our group, Save Riverview, we had donors and we raised money for an international competition. And Diane Lewis from Cooper Union won the competition, and it was going to become a music venue for teaching music. And the school board just did not want that to happen, even though they gave us an extra year to try and raise money for the music venue. And we showed how you could put the new high school behind Riverview and save this building and make it an important part of the campus. But unfortunately, they didn't want to save it, so they didn't. But the caveat was the chairman of the school board at the time told me that if you let us tear down Riverview, we'll save Sarasota High School. And it's like, I always felt that was an unusual comment because it's like, well, if you let me take one child, we'll save the other child.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Pick your favorite baby.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't feel like, I said, let's save both of them. But anyway, they did ultimately preserve Sarasota High School, which we're all fortunate for that.
What was it about Paul Rudolph and Gene Leedy's work, particularly the Sid Solomon studio, that spoke to you?
Oh, well, I was in high school, and there was a no-name storm that came through Sarasota. It was a severe tropical cyclone storm, and Gene Leedy's design for Sid Solomon's house was on the very southern end of Siesta Key on the beach. And it took a beating during the storm, and so they ran an advertisement in the paper. They needed some people to come out, some laborers to come out and help pick up a couple of the privacy concrete block walls that had fallen over, to pick up some concrete block and help clean the yard up and stuff like that. So a friend of mine and I answered the ad, and I'd always heard of Sid Solomon, too, a very, very well-known modernist painter. And I went to this house, and I was blown away. I mean, I didn't realize that. I think it was the first time in my life that I realized the power of architecture. Gene was first working with these pre-stressed concrete T-shaped beams and things like that, and these thrusting cantilevered balconies and concrete bridges between his art studio and the main house. It was just absolutely amazing. And I had met his son, and he brought us up into a studio, and all these beautiful There's a 2-story high exposed concrete block studio, and his canvases and paintings he's working on. And I think that resonated with me. And ultimately, I mean, I've told Gene this too. We had a really nice friendship. And I said, you know, you're responsible for me getting into this profession. And he always enjoyed that story. But when I went to college, I went pre-med, and I had a roommate that was studying architecture as a freshman, and I was taking chemistry and calculus and physics and all this stuff. And he was in there staying up building models at night. And I said, he's having a lot more fun than I am. And I kept thinking back to this experience at Sid Solomon's house. And so I took an introductory architecture class at the end of my freshman year in college. And I went home and told my father, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm changing architecture. And I never looked back. But it was that experience that kept resonating with me about seeing that house and experiencing it. So I think that's unfortunately, that house is no longer there because the beach eroded when they closed Midnight Pass, and it just suffered so much damage. Mm-hmm. And actually, the woman that bought it when the house was torn down, she hired me to design a new house on the upland portion of the property. But unfortunately, it never came to fruition. But it was nice. It was of the flavor of Sid Solomon's house that Gene did in terms of materiality and stuff, but obviously it was a different design. But to replace it with something that I thought would be meaningful is important to me, but I didn't get to see it built.
The first house that we can find that actually got built of yours, was that for Betty and Cheever Lewis?
Yes, it was. When I was in graduate school in architecture, the chairman of the graduate design program, I also worked in his office in graduate school. His name was Harry Merritt. Harry was a Harvard grad. If he was in Sarasota, they would have considered him a Sarasota school architect. He studied under Gropius. He had Buckminster Fuller for structures, Gideon for history. The guy was an amazing modernist architect, and he was very, very important in teaching me he did a lot of beach houses and things like that. And so when I started my own firm in Tallahassee in 1980, Cheever Lewis, his family started the Lewis State Bank in Tallahassee. He was the banker in the family. And his wife, Betty, they bought this property in Atlantic Village, which is down on the Panhandle on the coast. It's not on a beach, but it's on a shore overlooking the Gulf. And they wanted a modernist house. And my Harry Merritt roots came out of me then. And I designed a house much in the same language that Harry would have designed one of his houses. And I was really, really proud of it. It got published in Southern Living. And it was kind of interesting because that had quite a big readership. And my partner at the time, Ivan Johnson, we were getting calls from people around mostly the southeast United States saying, we saw this house, a dog trot for the beach. Can we get the plans for it? So I talked to Betty and Cheever, and they said, Guy, we don't live in a museum. If you and Ivan want to sell these plans for this house, we would let you do it. But the only condition is nobody could build one of these houses within 75 miles of where we live. So we put it out there, and I don't know how many we sold, but we sold quite a few, and I don't know how many were built. But it was kind of interesting. Yeah, we were a young firm with not a whole lot of work, and so it was nice to be able to capitalize on that a little bit.
Oh, that's fabulous. I wonder how many actually got built.
I don't know. There could be a bunch of them around. I don't know. I just don't know.
Now, later on, you renovated a famous Paul Rudolph house, the Revere Quality House.
Yes.
What was that like?
Yeah, that was much later in my career. Actually, it was the same time we were trying to save Riverview. And It was amazing. I had a client that I was doing a lot of work. He was doing a lot of spec houses, but modernist spec houses. And he had an opportunity to buy the Riviera Quality House that wasn't in ruins, but it was not really livable, and it had been overgrown with weeds, and the yard was a mess.
Why was it called the Quality House?
Well, there's a story of back in 1948 when it was built, the Revere Copper and Brass Company put out a competition. They were going to build houses around the country. Each house would have a different quality architect and a different quality contractor. And it wasn't a prerequisite to use copper and brass, but they encouraged it because that's their company. But they wanted to show people how you could build modest homes inexpensively that were fireproof in Florida, hurricane-proof, insect-proof, all sorts of high-quality goals that they wanted to meet. And for the Revere Quality House, they selected Paul Rudolph and Ralph Twitchell to design the one in Florida. And they picked John Lambie, who was a contractor, who would be the builder. And John Lambie was an interesting guy. He owned part of GE Foreign Division. He used a concrete delivery method that was designed by Thomas Edison. He developed a system called Lamolithic.
Lamolithic. Oh, yeah.
Lamolithic Industries. And that was the name of his company. And so John built the house, and it was a simple pavilion with a 7-inch concrete slab for a roof on 5-inch steel lolly columns. And there's a couple kind of shear walls that just keep the building from wanting to move laterally. And then all the interior walls were Paul Rudolph had gotten out of the Navy, and he had worked with striated plywood, and so he built these prefabricated wall systems that they plugged into the house, and that became the closets and dividers between rooms. And it was really an interesting house. Ezra Stoller photographed it. It was widely published. Urban legend has it 18,000 people went through it when it first opened.
It was in House and Garden magazine, Architectural Forum, Architectural Review. And there was a little intrigue as well because one of the architects, Ralph Twitchell, fell in love with the owner, Roberta, and moved in with her into the house.
Oh.
That's true. And also, if you look in Paul's book by John Howe, you'll see the Finney House, and that was another house. And I think the Healy Guest House was originally somehow related to Rebecca Finney, too. I'm not sure. But I could be wrong on that, but I believe I've heard that. Ralph Twitchell actually died in the house, and nobody lived there until my client bought it.
Okay.
But Ralph had added a carport building with a little architectural studio in it to the side, and then he had taken one of the famous, more identifiable portions of the Riviera Quality House is between the carport and the little house is this screened-in breezeway with an opening to the sky. Well, he had enclosed that into a living room and put brown ceramic tile in it. We fortunately had access to Paul Rudolph's original plans. So the contractor was Pat Ball. We were able to remove everything that Ralph Twitchell had done to make it his own home and bring it back to the original Revere Quality House. And actually, it was interesting. Ralph Twitchell's son, Talon Twitchell, and it wasn't Talon, it was the other, Aaron Twitchell. It was Aaron Twitchell. He would come out to the job site, and we'd start scraping paint off the steel columns and off the blue ceiling. And he said, because he grew up there, he said, that's the original color. So we were able to use local knowledge, historical knowledge from the family to get the colors as close as they would have been. Because if you read the House and Garden reviews by Rudolph, it was peacock blue and buttercup yellow, and he had all these names for the colors. So I think it's a very authentic restoration. It's on the local register of historic places now, but it sits in the very central of a waterfront lot, and it's only just less like 750 square feet. So it's to justify my client buying this house and preserving it. He couldn't sell a 750 square foot house for the price of a waterfront property today. So I designed a companion house to it that sits to the side of it because the Revere Quality House looks east-west. We didn't want to build in front of it or on the other side of it. So we built to the side of it, and I kind of reinterpreted the language of the Revere Quality House into a modern structure. Just by FEMA regulations, the finished floor is higher than the roof of the Revere Quality House just because of flood rules today and everything like that. So the Revere Quality House was repurposed to be a guest house or pool. We added a swimming pool and a pool pavilion house. So
is the companion house larger than 750 square feet, which seems tiny?
4,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's big. Guy, I first met you when I gave a talk at a building that you saved from probably imminent destruction in downtown Sarasota. Tell us about that building.
Well, that would be the Center for Architecture, and the building was formerly known as the Scott Building. It was designed by Bill Rupp and Joe Farrell. Bill Rupp was a Sarasota school architect of quite some acclaim, and Joe Farrell was younger than Bill, and he became a partner with Bill Rupp at the time that they were doing this project.
And this was a bank, right?
No, it was the Barkus Furniture Store. It was designed as a furniture store with retail on one side with separate entrances. So the main building, since you were there with the lecture hall and the gallery, that was the furniture part. And then the University of Florida part, I transformed into their graduate Sarasota studio. That was the former retail side of it. But it's an interesting building because of the use of the double T's or single T concrete beams. I think Joe did most of that. He sculpted the underside of these beams with concrete panels, or he carved the beam to the left part of the concrete, took part of it away, and made very sculptural overhangs. It was used for years for different things in the county. Sarasota County purchased it as their mail center, and the rest of it was just kind of closed down. And my wife, Cindy Peterson, is an architectural archivist. Oh, yeah. And she was up at the University of Florida. She had started the architectural archive at the University of Florida, and I was teaching there. And Cindy had mentioned to the dean, if I find a building in Sarasota, would you be interested in opening a satellite graduate program? They said, absolutely. And so also Martin Gold, the director of the school, was involved in this. And so Cindy approached the county about the Scott building and said, would you consider leasing this to a nonprofit as a architectural education center, awareness center, and then also a city lab for the University of Florida? And some of the commissioners, we met with them individually, they said, yeah, that's a great idea, but how much is it going to cost us to move our mail center? Well, I don't know. You guys have to work that out. But anyway, ultimately, we got the building, and Cindy was able to form a 501c3. She went out and raised the money through donors, and lo and behold, we got the building preserved.
Beautiful restoration.
For architecture. Yeah, thank you. And Cindy also got it on the National Register of Historic Places. So it's well preserved, and I think it's a real asset to our community now. And George, you may or may not be aware, but the Center for Architecture and Sarasota Architectural Foundation are now merging.
Oh, yes. Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because there was this Hatfield-McCoy kind of thing going on for a while down there.
Well, it's more complicated. It was, but Cindy was on the board of SAF when she wanted to do this project.
Yeah.
And so SAF, they weren't comfortable taking that risk to raise the money to do it. So she and a few other board members said, well, I believe in it. So they left and founded the Center for Architecture and made it happen. And now I think enough time.
Now it's all coming back together?
It's coming back together, yeah. So I think that's good for our community because we didn't need two nonprofits that really have similar missions. I think Sarasota Architecture Foundation's mission has always been the preservation and respect of the Sarasota School, whereas the Center for Architecture was about past, present, and future architecture and all sorts of other things design-related and education, community education about architecture. So I think they had two different missions, but I think combining them makes a lot of sense.
And the new entity is called Architecture Sarasota.
Architecture Sarasota, that's correct.
And it's going to cover all the built environment in Sarasota, not just the modern stuff.
That's true. And I think, even Center for Architecture really focused on modern architecture. But I think instead of just focusing on the Sarasota School, it's going to be talking about what's happening currently, what we see down the road, and looking back in the past and maybe some historical architecture. We have walking tours in Sarasota about the history of Sarasota architecture. We had trolley tours about visiting not just the modern but historical as well. So I think it's a broader format now in terms of what they focus on. But I think, they're still going to have, I'm sure, their Modernist Week, and Center for Architecture will still have their exhibits and lectures. And those things, Sarasota Architecture Foundation didn't have a facility, a public facility or a physical facility where they could do those things. So I think it just makes a lot of sense. So I'm pleased that that's happening.
There's a term I found associated with you, Guy, design by removal. What is that all about?
Well, I've used the word essentialism as kind of an expression of what I try and do. And it's the idea of when you design space, it's when you come up with the idea of this is the space and this is the form. Now, what can I add to it to make it better? My goal is, now that I've developed this idea of what can I take away to make it more pure? And it's like, what's essential? And that's kind of the notion of naked, is that it's not additive architecture, it's more of a deductive process. There's a famous British architect, John Pawson, who I really respect, and I think he does it better than anybody, where he can just remove everything to the bare essential, but what you're left with is just natural beauty. It's just so simple and honest. And that's a hard thing to do, is to just take things away. And that's why, detailing and everything, you'll never see a lot of wood embellishment. Even our baseboards are usually buried flush in the wall with low reveals and things like that. It's just a matter of how does light and openings work with that. And it goes way beyond that in terms of structure. It's part of the sculpture of the space, and it's celebrated, not hidden. And a lot of the principles of the Sarasota School, but kind of a more softened Bauhaus kind of approach.
How many houses do you think you've done in your career, Guy?
I don't know how many were on that list. I think 100 or so on that list. There's others, a lot of renovations and things, but I probably altogether 150.
We have a great archive of Guy's work at usmodernist.org/Peterson. So tune into that. Thanks so much for joining us, Guy.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Before sunrise, before sunset, after midnight. Those movies I talked about earlier are all on a 9-year cycle. Returning guest vocalist Heather Rigdon has a cycle of her own. Her first album, Young and Naive, was released in 2007. Songs from the album, similar to one we'll hear today, are in films and TV, like Trust the Man starring Julianne Moore and the Fox drama Whitaker Bay. Then, 7 years later in 2014, she released Everything to Me. Well, it's 2021, and I'm hoping that Santa Claus will be bringing me her third album. Heather is entirely at fault for the success of our jazz music series. I got hooked on her Pandora channel, and after she came on the show, I just started booking everyone who came up on her Pandora channel. I mean, Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra and the Louis, Prima and Armstrong, were out of town, like way out of town.
Right.
But we got wonderful singers like Stacey Kent, Nina Freelon, Eliane Elias, Jane Monheit, Aaron Bohem, Janice Siegel, Bria Skunberg, Lily Frost, Sophie Millman, Diana Panton, Linda Eder, and Haley Tuck, and many more. But there's nothing better than talking to the original, wonderful Heather Rigdon. Hi, Heather. How you doing?
Hi. Hello. It's so good to be here again. So good to see you this time, too.
Yes. So when you were on the show last, you were in Nashville, Tennessee. Where are you now?
I am in Saxe, Texas.
Where's that?
Yes.
Saxe?
Saxe. It is SACHSE, Saxe, Texas, and it takes me 20 minutes to get to downtown Dallas. So
Okay.
It is
Okay.
a little suburb right off to the northeast of Dallas.
Okay.
And what is Saxe famous for?
For just being Saxe. You get to... I mean, how apropos for me to be a jazz artist moving to Saxe. So we just kind of keep it clean here.
Okay, because there is an obvious alliteration there, but
Now,
Yes.
what took you to Saxe from Nashville? Did you have family in the area?
My mom and dad they live in Lucas, which is literally probably 12 minutes up the road.
Okay.
And so last time we talked, we're in Hendersonville, which was a little suburb of Nashville. We had moved from downtown Nashville to Hendersonville. And then during the COVID lockdown and everything, and my husband and I looked at each other and we were kind of like, what? My grandmother passed. We came to the funeral here in Lucas, Texas, and just really noticed a lot of time passing and decided if we could move, we would. And it felt really important to be near family. We found a house in Saxe and moved at the end of December. So it was a really quick turnaround.
And how was moving in a pandemic? Was that any different than normal moving?
I think it was pretty normal. I think anytime you move, everything's just thrown upside down, like a tossed salad. Everything gets tossed around and you get to get rid of a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of, stuff upheaval, which is nice.
Heather, were you in Texas during the big freeze this past winter?
I was. Yeah.
Was that fun?
Yeah, we're super lucky.
Oh.
We got here just in time to be a big part of the only time Texas has ever had that much snow or that much ice. So basically we had some pipes burst in our house. It's a 1990s, so, big, full, wide ceiling, very different from my mid-century ranch from Hendersonville. But this one had some old pipes. They burst. And my husband and I fought the good fight. We didn't have too much damage. We were very fortunate to get out of it pretty easily.
Now, when you were in Nashville, you were a teacher and a tutor. Are you still doing that in Texas?
I did. I jumped right in here and put in my applications. And interesting note, principal here I guess, 20 years ago, she and I taught together as teachers. She saw my name come around, and it's still Heather Rigdon. I never changed my last name. And she called me and said, are you Heather Rigdon? And we just, reminisced about everything, and she gave me a job. Well,
what a small world.
I know. I interviewed for her team, and I was very happy when they chose me. And so from January to May, I've been teaching fourth grade, all suited up from head to toe, had my mask and my double mask. And then our kids, I can't say more about just how brave, how courageous, how strong our teachers are, and it was just really amazing just to kind of be a part of the system and just kind of see how it all was working and not working, and just really proud of our kids and proud of our teachers for just jumping in there and just keeping things at least, humming a little bit.
How long does it take for some of the parents to go, oh, wait a second, didn't I hear you on my FM radio this morning?
What's funny is that was one thing my principal, she was giggling about. She's like, they're going to Google you. And she said, it's not going to make sense to them, to what and how you are also their teacher. So I honestly there's not a whole lot out there professionally for me with the teaching side.
Right.
So I think, there's been enough years to where if you see the pictures of me, I'm not exactly that girl anymore.
Right.
So maybe there's been enough years to where they're like, that's so interesting. There's a jazz person that has the same name as our fourth grade teacher.
There's two of them.
Yeah.
There's two of them. And so I really don't talk. It's funny. Because of that, it's always been kind of a little bit of a confusion, because I've always taught and always have tried to pursue music. So I don't really mix both worlds. Every now and then someone will find out, and I'm just like, oh, wow. So the teachers that I teach with, they definitely were on board. They definitely knew, by the time we were done teaching together, and we had, fun with that. But the children, we don't really talk too much about it, to the children or the parents. And if the parents find out, I think it's wonderful. And it's usually a whole nother fun conversation that we have. It's always fun when they're like, oh. And so, you've had a whole nother crazy life. Like, how in the world? Yeah, it's been kind of wild doing two things at the same time. It makes for crazy sometimes.
Tell us about this song, Sunday Morning with You.
Well, Sunday Morning with You, first of all, it's written by Goldmacher and Joel Evans. One thing I love the most about it is just how laid back and relaxing it is. And, growing up as a preacher's daughter, my Sundays were anything but relaxing and and laid back. Generally, we were up and getting ready and, running to church. And then afterwards, I usually would go home with a friend, and then we'd go and be investigators all day and, play around. And then we'd come back for church at night. But what I really love about this song is when I sang it in my adult years, I just wasn't going to church as much or as regularly, but I was finding more of my church like in the hills and like walking Nashville and Radnor Lake and all of these things. And I just love the picturesque morning of just sitting there, having your coffee, your partner or whoever you're dating is, there, maybe doing their thing, you're doing your thing. And then there's this very lazy coming together, that's very nice. And our Sunday mornings are still this nice, beautiful, languid, lazy morning now. And every time I hear this song, I honestly think of my Nashville mornings the most, where I, was just kind of reordering things for myself.
Here's Heather with Sunday Morning with You.
Sunday morning, slow and sweet, sleepy heads and stocking feet. Not a thing I'd rather do than spend my Sunday morning with you. Coffee table, New York Times, sunlight sneaking through the blinds, cozy sofa just for two on a Sunday morning with you. By Friday, we're so frazzled we can barely move. We rehabilitate on Saturday till our mentalities improve. Buttered toast, scrambled eggs, Grandma's blanket across our legs. There'll be work next week we'll have to do, but not this Sunday morning with you. Frazzled, we can barely move. We rehabilitate on Saturday till our mentalities improve. Sunday morning, ain't it sweet? Our favorite day comes every week. Not a thing I'd rather do than spend my Sunday morning with you. Spend my Sunday morning with you.
Heather, I have to say, I've noticed a distinct lack of bread products in this song. I mean, like, were there waffles, pancakes, bagels, any kind of bread products in this part of this Sunday morning?
I thought I heard buttered toast.
It was toast, yeah. We had toast.
There is buttered toast because it's a staple, but I've been on keto for quite a while now. I've been ketoing it, and bread products are
out of the
really
question.
frowned upon.
Right.
It is kind of cute, like listening back. I was kind of reminiscing, and it kind of takes you back to that time when you're in the studio. And if you listen critically, on that first little go around when I say "own Saturday," and I said, we recapitulate on Saturday. My Texas roots were definitely shining through on that. And then again, it's funny that on a Sunday morning with you, that little line right there, it took forever for me to get, for some reason I was hearing one of those notes as a different note. But it's just funny, like, you just kind of going back through and just thinking of, time in the studio really is work. I don't know if people realize, but, sometimes you have to rework a line and work a line. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. How long ago was that?
This one, I believe, is on the second album, but it was actually one of the first when I was there, maybe somewhere around 2007, 2008. But that own is always something, whenever I hear it personally, it just really sticks out. You can tell I kind of correct it by the second own.
Yeah.
I definitely get it, the own.
No one else knows. Just you.
You're hearing things that only you will hear.
Just gremlins in the system, really.
But you come by that honestly.
I know, but isn't that fun, though? Like this is like, it's so funny. I can't unhear it. That's really the funniest thing. But, y'all, I love that song. I just love, love, love. Grandma's Blanket, Cross Our Legs. Everything is so texture. There's just a good feel to it.
Your first album was 2007, and the second was 2014. So any plans for something later this year, maybe early next year, that I can ask Santa for?
Well, I have, like with all the move, with everything being tossed up in the air and just kind of pulling through old stories, shedding some old stories, like even like what I just was talking about with how critical, I've been about, even just like the little tiniest things about my songs or how critical I've been of myself, for maybe not being enough or not blah, 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 like just getting out of my head and just really looking at pieces that I just have kept carrying around with me from place to place to place to place. And being able to be like, okay, we need to clear some mental space. We need to I feel like everybody during this whole time, I think I spent the first few months like really indulging in self, like, I want to be a part of the healing. I want to be a part of the great conversation. What is my piece? What is my part? Almost like I had this godlike quality that something that I was going to say or do was going to be this great inspiration for the world to heal and come back from this and have this huge big mouthpiece.
Like Kanye West and the Kardashians.
Okay.
They were going to heal the planet. I don't think we've seen that yet.
Well,
we haven't seen it yet. And, yes, but it's really wild how, we do think and we keep thinking we have to do these big grandiose things. The whole fact of getting back into teaching, getting back into sloughing off the layers and just realizing that my time is so precious with my girls and so precious with my husband and pulling out pieces. And one thing that I've not ever been able to let go of is the creative piece. And I will always be a creative person. I will always try to write. I will always try to sing and put my voice. I can't shirk that. Obviously I don't think the tools are as readily available in Saxy, but, I am putting the feelers out. I'm writing with a friend through email. We finished one song. I'm pulling some little pieces and seeing if they have life in this new thing that we're doing and shaking it out and seeing, if it has legs to walk on its own. I don't know that I'll make 21, but I'll tell you what, with the way the whole music scene is changing even, the good thing is you don't have the pressure of having to put out an entire album all at once anymore. You
can do it in pieces.
Being able to do it in pieces, do it in songs that have stories and little depth to them. I don't know really where my place is in this new world, other than the fact that the further I get to rooting myself, the more clear the context that I'm making in the real world with the real people that I'm engaging with every single day. I think you can bring change that way because then you are changing this tiny little circle that keeps cycling around yourself. And you can move with that. Instead of feeling like you have to move the whole world, you can change where you are and really influence the life that you're present for. And I'm really trying to focus on that. So I guess the answer is I do believe I have for sure one song in the hopper, just trying to decide where and how, and probably make a trip back to Nashville just to record a few basic demo type things and just see, not have a grandiose idea as to where it needs to go, but just see where the next piece takes us. So do the next thing, and then hopefully the next thing will lead up to the next thing, and then we'll just kind of approach it that way right now.
This next song is one of my favorites. It was written by Heather's longtime collaborator, Cliff Goldmacher and Jeffrey Franzel. Here's Heather with Gravity for Grace.
You lift the weight of my world with a touch of your hand. Show the heaviest heart what it's like to dance. You're my wish under starlight. It's finally come true. I can feel myself glow like the autumn moon. I'm letting go, coming unbound, till there's nothing left holding me down. Higher and higher, hopelessly rising, your love makes me lighter. And what's so surprising is when I close my eyes and feel your embrace, I'm giving up gravity for grace. You're a glimpse of forever in a lingering glance. I'm trading my tether for romance. You found me alone with nowhere to go. Now you're holding me close and I'm floating higher and higher, hopelessly rising. Your love makes me lighter. And what's so surprising is when I close my eyes and feel your embrace, I'm giving up gravity for grace. Unbound till there's nothing left holding me down. Higher and higher, hopelessly rising. Your love makes me lighter. And what's so surprising is when I close my eyes and feel your embrace, I'm giving up gravity for grace. I'm giving up gravity for grace.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it, though, Tom?
Yeah.
We only pick out the good ones. You know, you've made it when people start doing covers of your music. Heather, I just discovered someone named Alexandria Holly Lutz from Nashville.
Yes.
Who did a cover of Young and Naive a number of years ago.
So you know her, I guess?
You know what is crazy is my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was having a drink with one of his buddies, and the bartender, you know, and as you talk, and they talked with her, and she was like, yeah, you know, they're asking her what kind of music she was into, and she's like, jazz. And they're like, oh, really? Well, who's your favorite jazz artist? And she was like, oh, you wouldn't know her. And both, you know, my husband and his buddy Leon were like, try us. And she goes, well, it's an artist named Heather Rigdon. And he goes, that's my girlfriend. And she was like, no, it is not. And he said, yes, that's my girlfriend.
You say that about everybody.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
That's amazing.
So Vince and Leon called me, and she was getting off after her shift or whatever, and we met at this little hole-in-the-wall bar called Sweetwater. She came in, we met, we played pool. We had such a good time. It was so much fun just to kind of meet somebody who was excited, about something I had done. Yeah, it was really fun. It was a good night. So yes, she's a beautiful person. So I think I'm finally just finding a grounding in this new thing that I'm doing called motherhood.
Motherhood. That'll be a track on the new album.
Yeah. That's a whole nother Oprah, that whole thing.
You can learn more about Heather at her website, heatherrigdon.com. Thank you so much, Heather. You are the Terry Garr to my David Letterman. Please come back anytime.
Thank you so much. I will. Have me all the time. I truly appreciate it. Okay.
And now a few minutes with Frank Harmon, reading from his book, Native Places.
Hawk. Hope is the thing with feathers. Emily Dickinson. My daughter Laura and I were sitting at the dining room table eating French fries dipped in mayonnaise. Chickadees and finches nibbled at a bird feeder outside the window. Birds thrive in this slightly run-down university neighborhood where unkempt hedges and rough backyards offer food and shelter. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon when a red-tailed hawk dropped out of the sky onto a tree branch outside our window with a songbird in its talons. As we watched it tear apart and devour its prey, Laura observed, "The hawk is big as a chicken." But unlike a chicken, the red-tailed hawk had rapier claws and a beak sharp as a paring knife. It was a killing machine with feathers. If nature is a contest between predator and prey, the songbird's momentary lack of attention and the hawk's sharp eyesight determined the match. One doesn't often witness a matter of life and death over a plate of fried potatoes, but we'd glimpsed a parallel world, a place of grace and blood feathered against a pallid winter sky. For several minutes, we didn't speak. Then a chickadee chirped and a flock of house finches returned to the feeder. We cleared the table.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Wendy Robineau and Don Beskin, and by Modernist realtor Angela Roll. Okay, Tom, wind us up.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 8,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino researches guests from her new desk at U.S. Modernist headquarters, drinking coffee-flavored Guinness at 10 a.m. and digging her toes into the rich orange shag carpet. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back in a week or so, much sooner than every 7 or 9 years, with another rapidly cyclical edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.